Hello everyone, welcome to Movao Live Talks. I am Rebecca Legon and today I'm excited to be joined by Kiera Roche, CEO of LimbPower, a charity in the UK. LimbPower is an incredible charity dedicated to supporting amputees and people with limb differences in getting back into fitness and sport. Their flagship event, the LimbPower Games at Stoke Mandeville Stadium, the proud home of the Paralympics, has launched many Paralympian athletes into their chosen sports. I can't wait to dive into Keira's extraordinary life journey and discuss her tireless work to support and improve the lives of our amputee communities. Keira, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's start at the very beginning. Tell us all about how you became an amputee and why you started LimbPower.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for having me. I became an amputee in 2001 as a result of a road traffic accident in Paris, and I became an above-knee amputee, but I also damaged the whole of my right side. So broke my arm in 6 places, broke my shoulder blade, punctured my lung, broke all of my ribs. So as well as being an amputee, I do have other challenges on my right side. Mostly I manage that through exercise, but we'll come on to that in a bit. Within a few months becoming an amputee, I decided that I wanted to get back into sport because I was very sporty beforehand. And there was nothing. There were no opportunities, and I tried lots of different routes and talked to different people. So I tried learning to run on a Malk unit. It's not designed for running, and it would jar your back. It was painful, but I was determined.
What is this?
It's leg from about 20 years ago. I think they still give it out. I mean, it's a good leg. It's a 4-bar knee joint with a hydraulic knee, and so you can have it as a free knee. But there's no compression and there's no cushioning. So, if you're trying to run on it, it hurts. Okay. So I tried that for a while, and my other half is a really keen cyclist. And he said, well, why don't you try cycling to get fit? So I started cycling and ended up cycling from Land's End to John O'Groats. And I found cycling easier than walking. So I did a few cycle challenges, London to Paris, London to Amsterdam, cycled along the River Nile. And then Ottobock brought out the 3S80 knee joint. And I was like, right, I'm going to run. And I went back to trying to run, and I got up to about 3 miles, and I just struggled to get further. And so I kind of reevaluated, why did I want to run? Well, I wanted to run because it's what I used to do before, and I love the sense of freedom that you get from cycling and running. And so for me, I kind of just reevaluated, said, well, I don't need to run a marathon. If I can run a mile, then that's great, because I'm still getting out, I'm still exercising. So that's kind of where my journey took me. But it became really obvious to me that each amputee is having to find all of this information out for themselves. And I saw a article in the Times newspaper about 3 years before the 2012 Paralympics, saying that they were fast-tracking military amputees for the Paralympics, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. But it just made me think the military amputee population, I think, is something like 0.05% of the amputee population. And I thought, well, who's doing this for everybody else? So I contacted the chief exec of the British Paralympic Association. He explained to me about the National Disability Sports Organisations, which are LimbPower, CP Sport, British Blind Sport, Dwarf Sport, UK Deaf Sport and the Special Olympics. There wasn't one for amputees, so I went home and registered LimbPower.
Oh, amazing. And what year was that? How old is LimbPower now?
That was in 2009. So we're 15 years old now.
Wow. And can you tell us a little bit about LimbPower, more about it and how it supports and what you do to support the amputee and limb difference community?
Yes, we started off by launching the Amputee Games, which is now the LimbPower Games. And the reason we did that is because we wanted to create an event that was really focused on bringing amputees together in a social environment, but also an opportunity to try lots of different sports. And the first year, I think we had over 100 amputees attend. It was a brilliant event. But after a couple of years of organising it, I realised that actually going from being a new primary amputee to taking part in sport is a huge leap. And so we then started working backwards and saying, well, the LimbPower Games is brilliant and it's still our flagship event. but how do we get people from leaving the Limb Centre to the LimbPower Games? And then we sort of work backwards, and we put in events like Beyond Boundaries, an event that was designed to give people the fundamental skills, the agility, balance, strength, conditioning, and focus on getting people more mobile so that they could then access stuff locally as well as coming to the LimbPower Games, which was only once a year. And then we kind of filled in back from there and introduced the children's fundamental skills. We then brought in the junior games. We added the Prepare to Move, Prepare to Run clinics, because running is the foundation of most team sports. Cricket, tennis, all of these sports, you have to be able to run. So we realised that running is actually a really good foundation, but running is really difficult as an amputee. It's slightly easier if you're a below knee amputee, but harder if you're an above knee amputee. And along with us launching LimbPower and filling in this gap, improvement in prosthetic technology has been phenomenal. The choice of prosthetic components now is just huge. And there's a misconception that you need a running blade to be able to run. But actually, within the NHS prescription, there are different components, prosthetic feet and knee joints, that you can run on. And they're designed for jogging. We're not talking about competition elite sprinting, but products that will enable you to go and play badminton at your local centre, or be able to play standing tennis, which is really growing in popularity at the moment. So it wasn't just LimbPower on our own.
Less mobile amputees. We're not talking about Paralympian athletes or people like that, but we're talking of people that just want to maybe play tennis with their kids or with their friends, or golf, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we focus very much on everybody, and the fact that we've been able to help elite athletes is brilliant. But we've been able to do that by putting in the foundations in place so that everybody can take part in physical activity and sport. And then those that have the determination, the dedication, who have the willpower and commitment, can then go on and excel. And not everybody has the potential to be an elite athlete. And not everybody has the conditions to be an elite athlete. Lots of us have to work. We have full-time jobs. So finding the time to commit to that level of commitment that you need to be an elite athlete, which is the same as being an Olympic athlete. You're talking about 4 hours of training every day. And the majority of us don't have the capacity to do that.
It is so important. People don't actually realise the importance of including physical activity and exercise into anyone's routine, but particularly those who are amputees or have limb difference, because not only does it make us physically fitter mentally and physically, it also allows us to be more mobile on our prosthesis, and that's really, really important for us to be able to get around and be independent and partake in regular activities. So yeah, it's really important. People don't realise how important it is for us in relation to our physical activity, our mobility on our prosthesis.
Yeah, and for me, one of the really, really important things is the whole conversation about weight management. But actually, for us amputees, it's not about being thin. It's about managing your weight so your prosthetic fits. Because if you have a prosthetic that fits and is comfortable, you can be mobile. And particularly as people get older or go through the menopause and they have challenges with their metabolism, or if somebody has diabetes, it's harder to manage. But actually, being able to maintain the same weight enables you to stay comfortable in your prosthetic, which means that you can do more. You can spend time with your family. I talked to a physiotherapist that I've known for over 20 years. And, we had a conversation about when me and her first talked about sport. The general consensus is not to encourage people to do sport, but to manage people's expectations.
Yeah.
Whereas with the work that we've been doing, and not just us, but lots of other organisations as well, but the dedication that we've put into saying physical activity in sport is a really important part of people's lifestyle, people's family. And actually, if you want amputees to have inclusion and accessibility, then they need to have access to exercise, fitness, physical activity, sport.
And so what LimbPower provide to the amputee community?
We've got so much now. For example, our YouTube channel has over 200 different exercise videos that were validated by a university and a prosthetic physiotherapist. And these are exercises that are really good for amputees to improve your stability, improve your balance, all the things that enable us to be more mobile, but also looking at things like flexibility and reducing the risk of getting contractures because your muscles have tightened because you're not using them, which then impacts on your mobility and your ability to use your prosthetic. And then we have lots of videos of fitness classes, but also we have our Limb Talk series, which are different professionals and different amputees talking about different aspects of amputation. We've got quite a lot of resources that we've kind of backfilled from when we first started, and we look at the gaps and say, right, here's the pathway. I'll just use an example. Here's a pathway from a child who's become an amputee who wants to engage in school PE. How do we get them there? What tools do we need to give them? So we've done a lot of work with the Youth Sport Trust, who've just been phenomenal in supporting us and what we're trying to achieve. And we've created a series of cartoon infographics for children around being an amputee and what you should do at home, in school, on holiday. We've got PE, we've got one for cycling, running and swimming. So we're looking at those core areas that a child might want support in, and we've put it into a user-friendly format using cartoons. Okay. And then for adults, we have a range of different activities, which include things like our Making the Most of Your Limb Centre visit, our summer and winter guides for being careful with your prosthetics in the winter, looking after your prosthetic in the summer. And we then have our sport-specific or exercise-specific infographics as well. And then we have our range of different events that we put on, including our daily online exercise classes.
Yeah, so all this is going to be accessible, obviously, for people internationally and not just UK based.
Yeah, the only thing that's sort of limited to the UK are the events, because you need to be able to travel to them.
Yeah. Talking of events, we met when we climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, and it was part of a LimbPower charity challenge, and it was literally like one of the best experiences of my life, even up until now. And what was really, really crazy is we were two single people on the trip who ended up sharing a tent, who bizarrely found out that we only lived 20 minutes away. Going on to, we've done lots of work. I came and worked for LimbPower, managing your fitness programs. But I hear as well, you've just come back from Machu Picchu. How was that? Because literally, these events are so life-changing and so much fun. Tell us all about this, and, can people globally get involved, or is it just for people in the UK?
Right. So actually, so not normally with the challenges, everybody is from the UK, although we have had people from America before. But on this challenge, we had 3 Europeans and an amputee from America. Wow. So of the 32 people that took part, 4 were from other countries.
And how was it? Really, really fun and beautiful.
It's the most beautiful place in the world. It's just stunning. The culture is fascinating, and Machu Picchu itself is just beautiful. The trek was really hard. Obviously, you're flying into altitude, so before you even start, you're already in a sort of altitude deficit. So that was a struggle, and you've then got the time difference, so you're trying to recover from that. As an above-knee amputee, this was grueling. It was much tougher.
How did you train for it? Obviously, you had to put.
Well, I did more training than I did for Kilimanjaro. And yeah. I still found it incredibly hard. But my favourite day was actually the last day, where we walked up the steps from. So you stay at a place called Aguas Caliente, which is just lovely. It's a small town that only exists because of Machu Picchu. And then we walked up from the valley, the top where Machu Picchu is, and you just walk up these steps. And I think it took us about 2 hours 40 minutes to walk up the steps. Yeah. But it was just stunning.
Worth it.
Just beautiful. And the actual ruins themselves it's incredible. And we had a brilliant team. We had a lot of prosthetists on the team, which made a huge difference, and they were so helpful. And when I first talked to them about joining us, the reason that I said it would be really valuable is that they only see patients in clinic, and so they never see the real world problems. But until you actually see people in the environment and the impact of being an amputee walking, and I'm not talking about walking up a hill, I'm talking about walking up a mountain. It's really hard. And actually walking up steps was easier than walking up a slope with that gradient. But we had horses with us, and I did at one point get on the horse, and there was a part of me that's like, oh no, I've had to get on a horse. And then there's a part of me, how many people have trekked on a horse in the Andes going to Machu Picchu? So I reconciled it with myself that actually it was a brilliant new experience.
Next time, just don't walk it, do it by horseback.
Well, I think you can. You can't. The actual trail to Machu Picchu that the horses aren't allowed on, but actually going on a horseback ride through the Andes would be incredible.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. And I guess for all the prosthetists, like obviously with myself being an active amputee as well, I often find that the things that happen with my prosthesis in the limb centre do not mirror what's happening out on tricky terrain. And it's really difficult when you don't understand the technical talk, how to explain what's happening. So I would imagine it was hugely educational for them to be able to deliver care in the future, being able to witness what happens on those difficult terrains and seeing people using prostheses in that environment, I would imagine would be really helpful for their ongoing care. So I bet they loved it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, every single prosthetist that were with us were absolutely brilliant. It was just really good to have them with us. And they'd brought loads of product with them, in case people needed extra padding or gels. One of them actually turned my foot around slightly for me because we realised that it was less efficient. It was just really good to have them with us. And I think going forward, I would always try and have a prosthetist and a physio on the trek, not just to help us, but also for a learning that they can take back to other patients.
Exactly, yeah. And did anyone have any, because when we did Kilimanjaro, quite a lot of the other amputees had technical issues with their prostheses, but us, we didn't. And obviously we had the issue of charging our sea legs, which we had this little device made, didn't we? With lithium.
Yeah. I took it with me.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Did it work still?
I used it, yeah. I used it.
Oh my.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, we didn't have any breakages like we did on Kilimanjaro. Obviously, with the altitude and the heat, you're shrinking, you're swelling at different times, and then obviously when you're working really hard, the leg becomes looser. So people were stopping and changing their prosthetics. There was one chap who had a lot of issues with his socket, and the prosthetists were just brilliant in kind of helping him and supporting him with that. There were some injuries just from the difficulty of the terrain.
And do you have any other challenges on the horizon that you are thinking about for people to get involved in?
Well, so we're thinking of something a bit closer to home next year and doing Snowdon. It is an achievable one-day challenge. And then we're having a debate with some of the trekkers who I've kind of just let go with it, between Iceland and Jordan in 2026.
Yeah, that would be incredible. Iceland.
I want to go to Mongolia on the horses.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, that would be cool as well. All of that would sound really good. So how would people find out information about it? Is it just something LimbPower will share closer to when it's been arranged? Because how do these challenges work? People book on and they agree to raise a certain amount of money, and part goes to LimbPower and part pays for the trek.
Yeah, so we offer 3, depending on which tour company we work with, where we do a full fundraiser, and that's really for somebody who really wants to get involved, but they don't have the capacity to pay, and so we support them with fundraising. Then there's a flexi option, which is one that I normally do, where you contribute to the tour costs and then the funds that you raise go towards the charity. And then there's the self-funders. And quite often with the self-funders, we'll get somebody who pays their own tour costs and fundraise. But we might get somebody who, is an introvert or isn't comfortable fundraising but still wants to be involved. And then they pay their own costs and they just come along.
Yeah.
Fundraising is really important. As a charity, we don't exist without fundraising. But not everybody has to fundraise because not everybody wants to fundraise.
Okay, excellent. So I often refer to you as the encyclopedia. for anything amputee related. You have like so much knowledge in all these areas. Do you have any advice for anyone who's struggling to retain their fitness after limb loss, and they're unsure of where to start? You know, what advice would you give to them in taking that step and getting back into some sort of normality when it comes to including fitness into their daily lives again?
Yeah, it's always a difficult one, isn't it? Because we're all different. We've all lost limbs for different reasons, whether it be trauma or illness. And so you need to understand the starting point for that individual. So I would always say to people, research. Do your research and contact us, talk to our team, talk to your hospital physiotherapist, talk to your prosthetist, talk to other amputees, talk to a personal trainer, read articles on fitness, on nutrition, and just really goal set. One of the things I think that people really struggle with, particularly with things like weight loss and improving fitness, is that it's a slow burn. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not a quick win. And so you can start and get disheartened. And I mean, for me personally, I try not to diet, because the minute I start dieting, I feel like I'm banning myself from something, and then that makes me want it more. So I don't diet. I look at incremental changes. So rather than having a chocolate bar, I would have some nuts, or I would look at healthy swaps. So I try to make small changes rather than big changes, because big changes for me personally aren't sustainable, and I think for a lot of people they're not, unless you've got really, really good willpower. And so David, our sports development officer, has lost nearly 3 stone doing Revamp, because he's really determined and really dedicated.
Please, for those who do not know about the program, I do, but what is Revamp and what does it do?
So Revamp is our 12-week fitness and nutrition program, and it's something that we launched during COVID. So in fact, the doctor who was on the trek with us, he was a GP, and he was quite heavily involved in the exercise referral program. And the programs that worked really well were the supported programs. You can go off and you can do 12 weeks of something, but unless you've got the tools to continue it at home by yourself, the chances are you're going to drop off. And so what we wanted to do with Revamp is to make sure that we had a program where the support was there, not just for the 12 weeks, but also the ongoing support through the WhatsApp groups, etc. And so we were really keen on creating a program where we had an amputee expert. So it was led by an amputee. It was managed by an amputee. We then had a physio and a prosthetist. We now also have a life coach in the group, and they're there every step of the way. So if you're struggling, you can just post in the WhatsApp group and say, I need some support. We have regular Zoom meetings where people can check in, and they get to talk to Jack directly. So Jack is our head coach at Revamp, and he's also an elite Paralympic athlete.
Yeah.
And he's a qualified personal trainer, absolutely brilliant, really knows his stuff, and he's then supported by the rest of the team. And we make sure that people have the tools that they need to try and maintain the exercise. We have a physiotherapist within the team called Miranda, and she will help people adapt exercises if they're struggling with a particular exercise. We have a seated and a standing program, and in January we're launching an upper limb program.
Excellent.
Honestly, it's a brilliant program, and it really works.
Yeah, and I can remember when I was working for Revamp, I remember that so many of the participants who had taken part in Revamp, like, not only had their mental health improved from the program, but their ability to just be more physically mobile and to just look after the kids, the grandkids, go shopping, day-to-day jobs. Their life just improved so much just from having this Revamp program included into their life, because it also, you include nutritional support and everything that they can do, they can either choose to do in a gym or at home. And for a lot of amputees, and we found, within the charity, you can speak more about this, is the confidence to actually get to a gym. They find that very, very difficult, especially if they're like primary amputees and they're not used to getting back into something again as an amputee. They're very scared, aren't they? And they want to have support from people that know and understand, and that's what Revamp's really good at doing.
So a lot of what we do is being a stepping stone. So what we try to do is be the stepping stone to enable people to go into that gym. So by having Beyond Boundaries and having Revamp and having our gym resource, what we're trying to do is give people the tools in a safe environment among other limb different people to practice, so that they then feel confident to go and join the gym, as opposed to walking into a gym and being a bit nervous about, you know, whether you fit or whether you're going to use the equipment and you're not going to be able to use it, or, you know, some people are very worried about other people staring at them. And so by giving people that stepping stone where they can practice in a safe space and then take it out into the outside world is really important for some people. And there are some people who don't need us, who just get on with it. And they're the people that we want as volunteers to come and help us support the next generation.
To help motivate and inspire the others who may be kind of
Yeah,
struggling
absolutely.
to that point. And how can you give some of your advice to people who may be, you know, we're amputees, and one of the most important things is that we have a correct fitting socket, especially when it comes to partaking in fitness and sports. That's really, really important. What advice to those can you give that are maybe having issues? You know, a lot of us have been there, and sometimes the problems are really difficult to overcome, and sometimes they're never ending, and you never think that you're going to get there. What advice can you give to people who may be having prosthesis and socket issues, and what can they do to try and improve these?
So the first thing I would say is that if you are having socket issues and that's stopping you from taking part in activity, there is a plethora of activities that you can do without a socket on, and swimming being the most obvious one. And I think often there are so many barriers for disabled people to take part in not just physical activity, but in life. And I think sometimes we can get stopped by the barrier. So always think outside the box. And if your limb isn't fitting and you want to get fit, and obviously if your limb's not fitting, you can't cycle and you can't run. And so you feel like you're in a cycle of not being able to move forward, then look at things that you can do without wearing your prosthetic, so you're maintaining your fitness level. Because if your fitness level drops,
football.
Yeah, no, you can play amputee football, absolutely.
And also Tyler Saunders, he's an adaptive fitness instructor, and he does all his classes without wearing his prosthesis as well. But obviously, like, for some of those people, they don't have the confidence to go around walking on crutches, because you've got to feel quite comfortable. Or there might be an amputee in a wheelchair. So yeah, you mentioned seated classes. Tell us a bit more about seated classes designed for amputees and people with limb difference.
So with Revamp, we have a standing program and a seated program. And then with our online classes, 3 of our online classes are seated programs. And then Tai Chi and yoga, you can do seated or standing. So we're really, really conscious that not everybody is at the same level and has the same ability. So offering seated options and standing options means that if people are struggling with their prosthetic and you know they are spending a small period of time in a wheelchair or a long period of time in a wheelchair, there are options for them. So I think, just going back to your question about the socket, I think thinking outside of the box, and if your socket's not working, look at things that you can do to maintain your fitness without your socket. But if your socket is not fitting, get into the limb centre. The sooner you say that you need support, and if it's really not fitting, ask for an emergency appointment. You are entitled to an emergency appointment if your prosthetic is not fitting you, because you need it to remain mobile. And so for me, that's really important. But there are also lots of ways that you can help your prosthetic fit you. Technically, I'm not a prosthetist or a physio, so I don't want to give medical advice. But you know, there are stump socks, there are liners, there is the skin relief. You know, there are lots of different things you can do. There are pads that can be put inside. There are ways of making your socket more comfortable while you wait for a new socket.
Yeah, and this just reminded me, actually, not this year, but last year, of the issues that I was having with my prosthesis. I was born with limb difference, PFFD, and my alignment's very crucial. However, I didn't realise how important this was, because I literally had to cancel 2 of my hikes because my alignment was out slightly and was actually causing me lots of pain when I was walking. now this issue has been fixed, and it was something so small. So I have learned recently that alignment is also very, very important, especially even more so. Not saying it's not important for those who aren't born with limb difference, but because our genetic makeup is slightly different in our bone structure, it is really, really important that we get aligned specifically for our bodies and not textbook. And learning this recently has helped my future in making sure that I don't get any more issues again.
But alignment's also really important for preventing injury.
Yeah.
If your prosthetic is too long or too short, that's putting your back out, and then people can get lower back pain. So I call it a prosthetic MOT, but it's really, really important to keep checking yourself. Look in the mirror. Am I level? Is my alignment right? And if it's not, go to your limb centre.
Yeah, and if you're not aligned properly, you then weight bear the weight to other areas, so you can put that through your good knee and put extra pressure on that. So it really is very important. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think lots of us are always worried that we don't want to be mithering the limb centre, but at the same time, it's really important for our daily function that our prosthetic fits properly.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have briefly touched on this because you told us about your summer and winter guides. But with winter, we're all in full swing. We're not globally. There's some countries like Colombia, which were absolutely baking hot. However, for the majority of us, it's approaching Christmas season and winter. Do you have any tips for our amputee and limb different community for the winter months when it comes in regard to, keeping warm, wearing our prosthesis, maybe gadgets we can use for getting around safely on the snow?
God, I've got so many. For me, the most important thing is safety.
Yeah.
So, making sure your paths are clear. Leaves are an amputee's nightmare. Myself, last Christmas, I slipped on leaves, and it really hurts when you go down fast and hard. So actually looking at your environment, making sure that your paths are clear, and then basic things like, particularly if you're a wheelchair user, making sure that you've got a blanket in the boot of the car, that you've got water, because if you break down and lots of other people have broken down because it's snowing, it could be a while, and you should get priority. Always tell the AA or the RAC that you are disabled, because they will make you a priority. But make sure that you've got the equipment that you need if there is an emergency. And then, there are lots of little things you can do. I have these snow chains for your boot. If it's really icy, you can put those on. But to be honest with you, if it was really icy, I would avoid going out. But if you've got a job and you've got to go to work, then you don't have a choice. But I would avoid ice if possible, because it is dangerous, particularly black ice.
Would you use hiking poles as well if you had to walk around?
Yeah, and particularly the hiking poles without the rubber on, so that you've got the metal that can push into the ice. Crutches, I'm always really nervous about when it's icy, because they can slip underneath you. So I think walking poles are really useful, because they give you a sort of wider centre of gravity, and you've got more points in contact with the ground. I would look at things like making sure that you're wearing boots and trainers and not shoes.
Yeah.
If your shoe has no grip on it, then being on ice is dangerous, whether you're disabled or able-bodied. So I would make sure that you're wearing appropriate footwear.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would wrap up really warm.
Yeah, I tell you what I really struggle with in the winter, but it's quite hard to actually fix. It's just one of those things I've had to live with, is when it gets that cold, my stump gets really, really cold, and then it's hard to warm up inside your prosthesis, but you have to wear your prosthesis because you're out and about. So it's just that it goes a bit numb and cold. I don't know if you have any tips and tricks for anything like that, or you just have to deal with it. I don't know.
There are a couple of people that you can find online. I think one of them's called Sydney Ampuvist, and he does these really colourful socks that you can put on your prosthetic, and there's a couple of ladies who knit some prosthetic socks, so you can put it over your prosthetic in bed when it's cold. So that's really good for keeping it warm.
Yeah.
So and they're fun, sort of sharks and
yeah.
So But keeping your residual limb warm is really important. Of course, once it's in your socket, it does warm up. But putting your sleeve on first thing in the morning when it's cold is always not very nice. But there are things that you can do, like make sure you're if you can afford to, obviously, because not everybody can, make sure that your heating is on so that you don't get cold. You can get things like electric blankets. I know for the older amputee, Age Concern were doing a special package where they were offering older people heaters and electric blankets to help them with their heating costs. So that's a really good opportunity if they're still doing that.
One last question. Are there any exciting projects for you in the pipeline coming up?
There are. We're doing a project with England Athletics and British Athletics at the moment, where they have this fantastic. I was a runner as a child, and they have this brilliant program called Athletics 365, which is aimed at school children, and it's a progression through athletics. And I think they've got 12 levels. And you work your way through the levels. And we are in the process of creating an amputee module for Athletics 365, which will go out nationally. So we do our fundamental skills, which is the core skills you need for school PE, which is hopping, skipping, running, jumping, catching, throwing, kicking. So Athletics 365 will be a version of that goes to every athletics club in the country, and PE teachers can access it as well, which is really, really exciting. So that's what we're working on at the moment.
Yeah, because I wanted to ask you, because there's a lot happening at the moment with adaptive fitness and sports, and there's a lot more instructors out there with disabilities, and it seems to be becoming more inclusive, not probably as inclusive as we'd like it. But when I went to school, for example, there was absolutely nothing available, for me as a small child in the 90s with a disability, support-wise. Would you say that schools, primary and secondary, are becoming more inclusive now, and are there programs like this available for people with disabilities?
Yeah, I mean it's a hard one because there's so much more progress to be made, but if you look back sort of 30-40 years, the progress has been brilliant. With progress there can always be hiccups and changes, and for me the big thing is that there is now a disability module in most training courses. I don't think it's enough. I think it should be much more. I think it should be integral to it, but it's there, so that's a really good start. Most schools are involved in something called the School Games, and the Youth Sport Trust have worked really, really hard and have been working with ourselves and the other NDSOs to introduce. So each region has a School Games coordinator, and that School Games coordinator then liaises with all the PE teachers in that district or that area. And we've been engaging with the School Games coordinators, and so we're making more PE teachers and people involved in the school games aware of how to include disabled children in school games, how to include them in school PE. There is a lot of work being done to try and make school PE more accessible.
Yeah,
I don't know if you saw around the Paralympics, there was a big campaign about the fact of the number of disabled children who are not fully engaged in school PE, and it's too high. But work is being done to try and rectify that.
Yeah, I know that we're talking, this is a long time ago for me, but I can kind of definitely resonate with that. I had a memory come back to me when I was in the bath of all places, but I was trying to think when I stopped, because as a small child, like 7, 8, I remember in primary school, I loved being part of school sports day, the egg and spoon race, the sack, all those kind of things I absolutely loved. And I was trying to think, why did I fall out of love of sports when I was at secondary school? And I remember towards the end of my primary education to secondary school, it was that feeling of being the only one and the feeling of being chosen last that really kind of like stopped me wanting to engage in sports at school. And for me, I love it. I'm taking on sports now. I couldn't see why that would have happened, but it would have been the lack of understanding and support for me back then, and feeling so discluded and alone and not like everybody else. So I think it's probably really important that schools do try and engage. It's just how they move forward.
Yeah, we've moved. I think we've moved on a lot from. They used to call it the library child, didn't they? So we've moved on to the disabled child going and sitting in the library while everybody else is doing PE, and we've moved on from the disabled child having their physiotherapy session while everybody else is doing PE. And we're talking about more inclusion models. There's a STEP program, 4 different ways that you can include a disabled person in the activity. And that's not making them the referee or the linesman, but actually including them in the game. And I think amputee football is a perfect example where they've created a new type of sport where amputees can play on crutches and upper limb amputees can play in goal. And so it's a sport that's designed around the disabled person.
Yeah.
And then there are other options of adapting the able-bodied game to include disabled people. So, there are so many resources out there to enable teachers, but organisations like ourselves to engage with disabled people at different levels and with different abilities that we need to be doing more. There isn't an excuse for not doing more anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And this is my last question, actually, because I think it's a really good one. So finally, for yourself, reflecting on everything you've learned on your own personal journey from when you had your accident in Paris to starting LimbPower to where you are now, what advice would you give yourself back then as a new amputee that would have helped you on your journey? Say there's someone out there that's new. What advice would you give for them to get to that next step?
It's a really easy one. Be braver.
Yeah.
Try to push yourself outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Because there is a world of opportunity out there. There is so many, and I'm not talking about being an elite athlete, but just living your life, not reducing your circle of existence.
That's so true. And like for those who, because obviously a lot of our community members are, global as well as UK, I guess advice for them would be to research within their countries at organisations and the sports. There's always going to be something for them if they, reach out to certain organisations.
Absolutely. I think researching what's available and maybe being brave enough to start something new if there isn't something. The women's amputee football team is a brilliant example. There was a World Cup on the horizons. There wasn't a team, and lots of women were braver and went for it and have become, national players.
I know, and that the rumor on the street is that they're really trying to get it included into the 2008 LA Paralympics.
That would be really interesting because each nation is allowed to introduce a couple of new sports. So, for example, in France, of course, they did breakdancing. Which was absolutely brilliant, by the way. And they introduced surfing, which was also incredible. I don't know if you watched it, but the surfing was phenomenal.
No.
And so each home nation can introduce activities. The challenge with the disability squads is that you have to have enough countries with enough players around the world to fit the criteria. And that's where disability sport often falls down, is that there could be a brilliant sport, particularly if it's an up-and-coming sport like crutch football or standing tennis. But if you don't have enough countries with the infrastructure, they won't include it on the pathway. However, with women's football, there are now, 8 or 9 international teams?
There's 12.
Which is a good number.
Exactly.
So let's hope they do. But what we don't want is them to drop something else to include it. They need to add it and grow the Paralympic aspect of the Games, not replace one item for another or one discipline for another.
Absolutely.
But it would be amazing to see it at LA.